Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Still catching up on some of the things I've been wanting to make for a couple of weeks now, so we're getting there, we're catching up. But this week, I wanted to do a little video talking about some of the roster moves that have happened since I've talked about the teams that are in the league, and so moves that happened after I made videos talking about the teams. I believe there's only two. I could be wrong, so I'm going to double check and make sure just in case, but I believe there's only two moves that have happened that I never talked about, so we're going to jump in and we're going to talk about them. So the first one I want to talk about is the Chengdu Hunters signing Mmonk. He is a flex support player. He was promoted from Team Chaser, which is the Chengdu Hunters Academy team. That is where Lengsa, Kyo are full-time now, as well as you have the two-way contracts of the Evoltal and Late Young. Definitely a team to look out for because there are some known players on that team because they were formerly players from the Overwatch League. So it's an interesting move signing a flex support. It's a move that it doesn't really change my feeling of the Chengdu Hunters. That's why I wanted to talk about this one first because technically it was the more recent of the two, but it doesn't really change my thoughts on this team. Faraway 1987 is a player I don't know much about anyway. I heard pretty good things about him coming out of Contenders as he was joining this roster. Heard that he was pretty good. He had some solid play on the flex support role, but the fact that they brought up another one makes me a little concerned about whether or not it is a very good support line. When you have Molly, last season you trade him away to go to the Shanghai Dragons, and then you have to replace him with two different flex supports in Faraway and Mmonk. And really, I have to basically question whether or not that this is a smart move. It makes me a little bit worried about the team. Like, I was already pretty sure this position would be a downgrade anyway. I wasn't 100% positive, but I had a pretty good feeling it would end up being a downgrade. Obviously, we don't know for sure yet that it is a downgrade. It might not be. It might actually be a side grade. It might be actually an upgrade, but I don't get the feeling that it's an upgrade. I feel like it's just kind of a situation where maybe they do as well with Mmonk and Faraway 1987 as their support flex supports, but I don't really know. It is a 12-man roster. I'm getting kind of concerned about the number of 12-man rosters that there are this season. The main ones were Chengdu and Hangzhou. Some rosters I think could be good on paper, but I'm a little concerned about the fact that they are two full 12-man rosters. We haven't seen a ton of success from two 12-man rosters. I can't speak today, so a little bit of concern coming from me on this side because it is a little bit concerning. But I hope that Chengdu really kind of does what we saw like Shanghai do last season, where they find the roster that works best for them and they basically just stick to that roster. I think that this is a season that's really smart if you're a team like Chengdu or Hangzhou where you're just going full 12-man rosters. I think the smart way to approach the season, having players on two-way contracts like Evoltal and Late Young opens you up a lot. Because it means that you have these players on your roster if you need them. Like if you need a Zarya on your other Chengdu Hunters, you can just bring Late Young up just for Zarya. And if you need, let's say, a Mercy, right? Let's say Evoltal's Mercy is better than Nisha's Mercy. You can just bring Evoltal in for Mercy, and then you can send him right back down to Contenders. That is something that I think works very well for this team. It's something I do like about the fact that they have two-way players, something that the Hangzhou Spark do not have. But I hope that they find the roster that works best for them. They use this season as the season to spend big, so that when they go into 2022, which is when I think more teams are going to try to expand their rosters again, because we'll likely be back in person. And so this season, a lot of teams want to save money, so that going into 2022, I think they can spend big, and they can save money for homestands again, and they can save money to kind of build up a really good roster for that season. So I think that is what I'm looking at here with Chengdu and Hangzhou, is they're taking that time this season to build up that strong foundation of a roster, find out the pieces that work, and then cut back, much like Shanghai did last season. You look at Shanghai this season, they've cut back a lot of that fat. I think that's what we might see Chengdu and Hangzhou do going into next season. But I don't know. The signing for Mmonk really just makes me curious to see what they're going to do and how much he'll actually play and how much his entrance to this team will really affect the team going forward. I don't really know what to think, but I'm curious to see how it goes, because it is interesting to see them sign another player. But part of me gets the feeling that if he was promoted, he's probably going to be their main flex support player. I think it's a very good chance. Much like what we saw with the Atlanta Reign when they promoted Dogman. Dogman played all the time after he got promoted. He got promoted right before the season started, and then he played the entire time. Pretty much. I don't think Faraway will get as much play time as a result of that. Just seems more likely Mmonk will be their main star in that flex DPS role. Moving on to a signing that I think has a lot of implications for its team. This season, let's talk about the Philadelphia Fusion signing Rascal, formerly, of course, of the San Francisco Shock, to their roster. If you recall back to my roster breakdown of this Fusion team, the two things that I kind of talked about that I was a little bit concerned about were, number one, this tank line of Mono and Poco. These are two very talented players. We know they're both talented players. Poco spent a lot of time on the bench last season. He played early in the season, but by the end of the season was all Fury. Understandably so. Fury's a very good player, and I think that once they kind of switched into just running one off tank, they found more sustained success. 2 tournament finals at that point in time, once they switched just to running Fury full time. So there is a bit of concern about how good Poco is compared to what they had last season. He was on the team obviously last season, but it's a team that seems almost kind of beholden to a lot of their players. This is the only team in the Overwatch League to have more than one player under contract who has been with this team since the first season. And they have 3 of Carpe, Poco, and EQO. There's only 2 teams in the Overwatch League that even have players on their team that have been with the team since the beginning of the Overwatch League. There's 4 players total, and 3 of them are on the Fusion roster. The only other team with a player that they've had since the beginning is the NYXL with Jonak. So it is interesting to see that the Fusion have still stuck with Poco after all this time. You know, losing Fury I think is a bit of a hindrance, but Poco is good, and Poco is still good enough to get you to a championship. Where my issue comes into with this tank line, of course, is, you know, you have Mono and you have Poco. Mono's never played on a mixed roster. How well are they going to work together? That's kind of my main problem with this team. My other main problem with this team for a while was only having EQO as a flex DPS player. I thought was a weakness for this team. EQO has not shown the same level of flexibility as some of the other flex DPSs that are the only flex DPS on their team. Like, you know, Prophet is a really flexible DPS player, has played pretty much any hero at a high level as a DPS hero. He can play it, right? Even Rascal, who they signed, you know, is super flexible. EQO didn't have that. So I think bringing in Rascal is really, really good. I've seen a lot of people talk about how they're kind of worried that they're going to have 4 DPS players and they're going to have at least one player as a result who doesn't play a lot and who gets kind of is spending a lot of time on the bench. I don't really think that's a major issue, personally. I think Rascal and EQO have very different hero pools in a lot of ways, and that their playstyle is very different. You know, Rascal's good at Mei, something that EQO is not very good at. I don't think Rascal's going to be in Mei jail, but that is a noticeable difference. I think Rascal in general is better on most of the flex DPS heroes, with the exception maybe like Genji. I think EQO's Genji is better than Rascal's, at least for certain metas and certain styles of play, where I think EQO is more aggressive Genji and kind of hard carry Genji is really, really good. Who knows if we'll see a meta where that happens. You know, we didn't expect it when it happened in Summer Showdown last year, but and it very well could happen at some point in time again this season, so you can't, you know, eliminate the possibility of that happening. I think both players have really good echoes. Rascals is probably the better of the two. They also have Shockwave is a very good echo, so echo is kind of they have a lot of good echoes on this roster, so somebody obviously will play the echo, which is to be expected. But I do think there's some flexibility that Rascal provides that EQO doesn't. And I think a big area of that flexibility is actually Rascal's play on support heroes. Rascal's Brig is really good, and Rascal's BAP is really good. I don't remember a ton about Funny Astro's BAP and Alarm's BAP, but the reality is if you need a flex support, like a double flex support meta, you actually might have a really good flex support like double flex support meta, if you run Rascal Alarm on like Bap Ana, that might be better than if you run Funny Astro. And if you know you can go a whole map or a whole match or a whole meta running just Bap Ana, I actually think a Bap Ana with those two of Rascal and Alarm would be really good. I think people forget how good both, or who forget how good Rascal's BAP is. It's he revolutionized BAP play, right? The way we understand how Baptiste is played today kind of started with Rascal back in 2019. He was the first player to really pick up BAP and the first player to really elevate BAP to be a really good pick, but we never really saw it in 2020 because Violet became arguably the greatest BAP player in the league. I mean, he is really, really good at the hero in ways that Rascal is not quite as good. He's still very good, though. And so, you were never going to see a BAP Ana composition on the Shock last season with Rascal in because you had two of the best flex supports in the league with Violet and Twilight. But now you may actually see it on this team because Alarm is a very good flex support player. And you definitely want him on your Ana or your Zen if you're in a double flex support meta. But Rascal can pick up, I think, really well for that BAP, where he actually is a very strong player on the hero. And his Brig is very good as well. So there are definitely places where I can see Rascal being plugged in the support line, which is, I think, why Rascal is such a brilliant signing for this team. He can provide you with anything you need, right? We know there's some visa issues with this team. Poco, EQO, Funny Astro, Shockwave having trouble getting some of their visas in. Even Christopher, one of the assistant coaches, having some trouble getting that in. So it's all just perfectly done now because Rascal can kind of provide for you. If the season starts on a double flex support meta, right, you can probably get away running Alarm Rascal and winning games. Now, the problem if you do that is that you then won't have, you have to then put somebody on DPS, playing on high ping, which you may not want to do, because but EQ or Shockwave on DPS on higher ping, which I know there's the whole thing that the ping will kind of like stabilize or whatever, so who knows. I don't want to delve too deeply into my thoughts on this team because I want to save that for my power rankings video, but it is a very interesting signing and one that I really like. I feel a lot better about this team than I did when I made my video on this team in the first place, so overall I think this is a fantastic signing, and I think that the Fusion are going to be better than what I originally had expected just from this one signing. So those are my my thoughts for these two recent signings. Let me know your thoughts on these signings in the comments down below, but that is all from me. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing for more content like this in the future. But I'm going to get out of here. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.